Make Your Mark ended after chapter 6, now it's official. And I honestly don't mind. The show was aggressively not really good from the very start, and despite certain amendments made along the way, ultimately remained a major letdown. I talked about it in another 13-minute long video already. There are a lot of reasons why the show collapsed. Poor animation, almost no interesting character development apart from Misty, plastic world building messing up with the G4 lore, and most importantly, lack of any creative vision or a long-term plan. Seeking some actually good G5 content, I decided to familiarize myself with the official comic books by IDW. There are 20 issues already released in the main series, 2 miniseries, and 3 standalone comics. And what I can say about these comic books after reading them is that I definitely enjoyed them much more than I enjoyed Make Your Mark, and I think they are a much better and much more consistent follow-up to the movie. First of all, the comics were published by IDW, the same company that published G4 comics, and with largely the same staff that worked on G4 comics, so the style and tone are more or less the same. And if you read G4 comics, G5 comics have the same feel. I really like the art style, it's very pleasant, and it demonstrates how good these characters could look in 2D. Although it should be noted that the art style isn't the same throughout the whole series. In most issues the artist is Amy Maberson, and her style is very appealing. Cam Bighoof, a mini-series of 5 issues on the other hand, has a pretty terrible art style by Kate Sharon. This style isn't the only problem, but also coloring as well, because colors look way too saturated. These comics look like they weren't even made by professionals, but by some pseudo artist from DeviantArt. The story is too juvenile and boring as well, and overall this miniseries is terrible compared to the main series, and worse in every aspect. There are some notable characters that are missing completely in the main series. These characters are Sparky, Misty, and Opaline. I can only thank comic writers for not including Sparky. He only has very brief appearances in the 2 standalone comics. In the Bridal Woodstock he's got more personality in just a couple of panels than in the entirety of Make Your Mark, where his only role is to be a totally unnecessary plot device. The comics work so much better with the characters than the show, and give them much more personality and much more room to breathe. For example, Hitch turns out to be a part-time DJ, and he's got his own podcast which he runs with Zip, who is also into detective stuff. Sunny loves roller skating and even wants to join the best roller skating team in Equestria, which she used to adore as a kid. But the team turns out to be full of jerks who make fun of Sunny's amateur skills. So Sunny decides to start her own team and win the equestrian roller skating competition. She asks Pip to hire an equestrian champion of the past to help to train her and her team. This whole thing I just talked about fits within just one issue of Kentucky Roller Derby. Sunny faces a serious challenge that she must overcome. This is so much more than she faces in all 6 chapters of the show. This is how you write a sympathetic character that we can't be empathetic towards. You give them a flaw that creates an obstacle on their path, and make them overcome this obstacle through hard work and determination. It's inspiring and something that vast majority of people can relate to. Because nobody is actually flawless. Making perfect or nearly perfect characters makes them way less sympathetic and relatable, and this is exactly what Make Your Mark did to Sunny Star Scout. Zip also acquired an interesting feature. She loves eating, and especially she loves eating cookies. That seems like a pretty minor detail, but it just makes Zip a lot more complex as a character. Izzy's got more depth too. We find out that she used to teach a pony named Violet, who was and still is bullied and abused because of the way she looks. Why couldn't the show have all of this remains a good question. Speaking of world building, there are actually a lot more locations, villages in the comics, and not just 3 settlements surrounded by literal nothingness. Discord appears in the comics, which confirms that the comics aren't canon to the show. Discord steals one of the Unity crystals, and thus becomes the reason why magic gets so unstable. In the show Discord haven't appeared at all. Decision to include Discord is weird. Misty appears in the comics, not in the main series, but in the above mentioned Kentucky Roller Derby. Opaline appears in the black, white and blue standalone comic. If Discord is around, that means he can easily help to defeat Opaline. but after 10th issue Discord disappears, and he is not even mentioned at all ever again. I personally loved slice of life stuff much more than a Discord related arc. I'm curious why Hasbro allows comics to be that disconnected from the animated show. In the G4 comics we had Sombra's redemption, the same Sombra who got defeated for good in the opening of season 9. Why would Hasbro even do that? Animation and comics are like parallel universes, and whatever happens in the comics doesn't affect the main show at all. Not in the slightest. I assume that creates a lot of confusion with the target audience. If target audience even reads the comics, of course. If I separate comic book series from animated series, the comics get even more enjoyable. They have a lot going on in them, including some interesting new characters and their stories. In general, I think they are on par with G4 comics, and I definitely love them way more than Make Your Mark. Interestingly enough, the comic book series presents itself as the follow-up to the movie, and tries thus to distance itself from the animated series. The lack of Sparky, Misty and Opoline should probably be explained by this. IDW writers are clearly cooking up their own G5 universe, with almost complete disregard to Make Your Mark. If you want some actual enjoyable stories with main 5, then I would certainly recommend this comic book series. It's pretty dope.